From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has ordered the Department of Agriculture or DA to push forward with the modernization of fish ports nationwide, aiming to boost the fishery sector and secure a steady supply of affordable, high-quality seafood. Speaking during his inspection of the newly rehabilitated Suwal Fish Port Complex in Pangasinan Province Thursday, the only regional fish port in northern Luzon, President Marcos underscored the need for sustained investment in port infrastructure to expand capacity, improve seafood transport, preserve food quality, and support the livelihood of Filipino fisherfolk. The upgraded Suwal facility now features modern fish processing and cold storage units, a multi-purpose pier, commercial building, and improved access roads. According to the Presidential Communications Office or PCO, these enhancements are expected to cut post-harvest losses, widen market access, and ensure continuous delivery of quality fish to consumers. The President also met with Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources or BFAR crew members who recently faced harassment from the Chinese Coast Guard near Bajo de Masinloc in the West Philippine Sea. President Marcos commended their resilience and reaffirmed his administration's commitment to safeguarding Filipino fishermen and protecting the nation's waters.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has turned over 102.2 million pesos in aid under the Socio-Civic Projects Fund or SCPF to 511 villages in Tarlac Province, with half of the allocation dedicated to supporting presidential scholars. The distribution took place during the rollout of the Bawat Bayan Makikinabang initiative at the Tarlac City Civic Center, where the President also met with student beneficiaries of the Presidential Scholars Program. Each village will receive 200,000 pesos each, 100,000 pesos for local development and safety projects, and another 100,000 to fund 5 scholars, each granted 20,000 pesos for educational expenses. President Marcos stressed that education remains the government's top priority, calling it the nation's most vital investment. The President urged scholars to study diligently, complete their education, and use their knowledge to uplift their communities and contribute to nation building. He expressed confidence that barangay officials would manage the remaining funds responsibly, saying they are best positioned to identify local needs. As of July 2nd, the government has released 4.69 billion pesos to 23,432 villages nationwide under the SCPF.
Bakit natin pinaprioritize ang edukasyon? Bakit mahalaga ang edukasyon? Dahil unang-una, para sa komunidad, ito ay may importante para naman kayo. Ay meron kayong magandang napag-aralan, meron kayong magandang naitapos na sa eskwela. ay kapag ka ganun, yung inyong kaalaman, lagi ko nga sinasabi dun sa pag kinakausap ko rin yung mga ibang presidential scholar, lagi kong sinasabi na itong kaalaman na makukuha ninyo sa eskwela, wala, yan ang yaman. Yan ang ibang klaseng yaman yan. Hindi parang pera lang yan. Hindi lang parang may maganda kang malaking bahay. Hindi ganit. Ibang klaseng ang kayamanan, ang kaalaman. Dahil kung ano man ang natutunan ninyo sa inyong pag-aaral, ay yung kayamanan na yan ay hindi na maaring kunin sa inyo. Hindi maaring agawin sa inyo, hindi maaring nakawin sa inyo, at habang buhay sa inyo na yan, yung yaman na yan, at araw-araw, magagamit ninyo yung kaalaman na yan para pagandahin ang inyong buhay, para pagandahin ang buhay ng inyong pamilya, pagandahin ang inyong komunidad, at sa ganung paraan, pagagandahin din ninyo ang buong Pilipinas. Dahil pagka magandang edukasyon ng population, ng ating mga kababayan, kayo, pagka naging maganda, ay marami kayong magagawa na pampatulong. Hindi lang sa sarili ninyo, kundi sa inyong mga kapwa Pilipino. At yun ang pinakamahalaga sa lahat.
Alongside the financial aid, President Marcos distributed 10-kilogram rice packs to 3,077 beneficiaries in Tarlac, funded through the Local Government Support Fund or LGSF. The President noted that 1,276 local government units or LGUs have already received assistance under the program, with some granted a second round. President Marcos assured families that food aid will continue every 2 months, emphasizing that the government stands ready to support communities across the country.
Yan po ang ating dalawang programa. Yan po ang dalawang programa na nasa ilalim po ng bawat bayan makikinabang. Ito po ay ang magandang tulungan ng national government at saka ng local government. Talagang ginawa nating partner, hindi lamang kami nang uutos na sinasabi, ito yung gagawin ninyo, ito yung gagawin ninyo. Sa sinasabi, tulungan nyo kami para maibaba. Bakit natin ginawa nyo? Para maibaba ang benepisyo at saka lahat ng serbisyo ng taong bayan, mapababa ng mabilis at malawak kaagad. Kaya kung meron kayong naiisip na kailangan gawin, meron kayong nakitang problema, meron kayong nakitang solusyon, kung ano man, ang inyong mga iniisip, kung may hinaing kayo, may suggestion kayo, ay sabihin nyo po sa amin. Sabihin niyo sa inyong mga local government official, sabihin nyo sa mga nandito, mga representative ng mga iba't ibang national agency, at alamin para malaman namin kung ano ba talaga ang pangangailangan ninyo. At asahan po ninyo, kagaya ng sabi ko, ang inyong pamahalaan ay nandito para sa inyo. At kung ano man ang inyong hinihiling, kung kaya namin ibigay, kung kaya namin gawin, asahan ninyo, gagawin po namin. Asahan ninyo na yung pamahalaan ninyo ay nakikinig sa inyo at ginagawa ang lahat. Nag-iisip kami kung paano pa ang makatulong. At lahat ng maaring gawin ay gagawin namin para naman matiyak na ang ating mga kababayan, lalong-lalo na yung mga nangangailangan, ay naaalagaan, naaalalayan, hindi lamang sa panahon ng sakuna, kung hindi sa araw-araw ninyong buhay.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. on Thursday paid tribute to the valor and commitment of the Northern Luzon Command or NOLCOM officers and troops during his visit to Camp General Serviliano Aquino in Tarlac. The Commander-in-Chief received a full briefing on NOLCOM's operational readiness, highlighting its capacity to safeguard the nation's territorial integrity and maritime domain. President Marcos underscored the urgent need to further strengthen the command's preparedness, interoperability, and coordination with other government agencies and allied partners. He stressed that these measures are vital to confronting both current and emerging national security challenges. The President reaffirmed his administration's unwavering commitment to defend the country's sovereignty and national interests. President Marcos also emphasized continued government support for Filipino soldiers, ensuring their welfare, enhancing their capabilities, and recognizing their sacrifices in the service of the nation.
Dateline Malacañang.
Also on Thursday, Malacañang has defended President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s approval of the release of Vice President Sara Duterte's tax records to the Senate Impeachment Court, saying the move was anchored on law, truth, and due process. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro explained that the President merely allowed legal proceedings to take their course after the Senate Court subpoenaed the Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR. She stressed that President Marcos would not block evidence sought through lawful judicial channels, adding that the President will not withhold the truth from the Filipino people. Castro dismissed claims of political motivation, saying critics often brand lawful actions as political. She emphasized that President Marcos was simply following legal processes.
Kung ano ang sinasabi ng batas, kung ano ang proseso, susunod po ang Pangulo. So kung yan ang sinasabi po at kinakailangan na magbigay siya ng kanyang approval sa BIR, para mabuksan ang tax records nila VP Sara at ni Atty. Manscarpio, at ito naman ay para sa katotohanan. Hindi niya po ipagkakait ang katotohanan sa ating mga kababayan. But hinihingi po ito ngayon na pagkakataon. At yun po ang sinasabi ng mga nasa Senado. Yan po ang hiniling. Kahit na po si Senator Lacson, yan din po ang ating nadinig, hindi po magiging hadlang si Pangulong Marcos Jr. sa paglabas ng katotohanan. Sa lahat naman ng pagkakataon, kapag ang Pangulo ay gumagawa ng naaayon sa batas pero merong tinatamaan, laging sasabihin nila, politically motivated. So saan pupunta? Saan gagawi ang Pangulo? Kahit ano pang sabihin ng iba. Basta ang alam ng Pangulo, siya ay tumutupad sa proseso, siya ay tumutupad sa batas, kahit siya pa ay paringgan o bigyan ng negatibong impresyon, hindi matitinag ang Pangulo. Basta siya ay sa batas at sa proseso.
BIR has since transmitted Duterte's tax records along with those of her husband, lawyer Manscarpio, and companies linked to the couple. The Senate Impeachment Court earlier granted prosecutors' requests for subpoenas covering tax, bank, and financial documents to support allegations of unexplained wealth. House prosecutors have cited alleged bank transactions amounting to 6.77 billion pesos from 2006 to 2025, which they claim do not match Duterte's declared assets. Her defense team has opposed the subpoenas, arguing they are illegal, unreasonable, and violate constitutional rights.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has moved to accelerate the country's entry into the global electric vehicle or EV industry, signing Executive Order or EO number 121 to establish a sweeping incentive program for EV manufacturing. The order ushers in the EV Incentive Strategy or EVIS program, a framework designed to draw investments into local production of electric and hybrid vehicles along with their parts and components. President Marcos emphasized that the program is not just about building cars, it is about strengthening the Philippines' manufacturing base, securing energy futures, and aligning with environmental goals. At the heart of EO 121 is a promise of fiscal support. Companies willing to invest at least 5 billion pesos in EV manufacturing can qualify for fixed investment support, covering costs from tooling and research to training and startup operations. Those who commit to producing at least 10,000 EV units may also receive production volume incentives, capped at 200,000 pesos per vehicle. Together, these incentives, available for up to 10 years, signal a government push to make the Philippines a competitive player in the regional automotive supply chain. Oversight will rest with the Board of Investments, backed by a new interagency committee that includes the Departments of Finance, Energy, Transportation, and Budget and Management. Their role to vet applications, enforce compliance, and ensure that fiscal support capped at 60 billion pesos overall delivers measurable impact. Industry response has been swift. Mitsubishi Motors Philippines Corporation hailed the EO as a milestone, reaffirming its 7 billion peso investment commitment to produce hybrid EVs locally. Chairman Noriaki Hirakata said the initiative strengthens the country's competitiveness and supports sustainability objectives while creating opportunities across the automotive ecosystem. The order takes effect immediately, marking a decisive step in the Philippines' bid to carve out a place in the fast-evolving global EV supply chain.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang has dismissed Vice President Sara Duterte's latest accusations linking President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. to the International Criminal Court or ICC, branding them as baseless and nonsense. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said Duterte's remarks that President Marcos is allegedly supporting the ICC and receiving support in return carry no weight. She suggested the vice president may be speaking out of frustration over her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte, who is currently detained in The Hague and facing trial of crimes against humanity tied to the anti-drug campaign. Sara Duterte, speaking before supporters in The Hague, accused the president and former Senator Antonio Trillanes IV of being traitors, alleging they were behind her father's trial before the ICC. Castro countered that the case was filed in 2017, years before President Marcos became the president, stressing that responsibility lies with the former president's own actions. She added that the ICC is an impartial tribunal that cannot be influenced or intimidated, underscoring that the proceedings are independent of the current administration.
Ang lahat po halos ng sinasabi ng Vice Presidente sa ngayon ay walang basihan, walang saysay, useless, at nonsense. Maaaring ito ay kanya nasasabi out of frustration dahil ang kanyang ama ngayon ay nililitis sa ICC. Tandaan din po natin, uulit-ulitin natin, ang kaso na naisampa kay dating Pangulong Duterte ay noong taong pang 2017. Habang ang Pangulo, si Pangulong Marcos Jr. noon, ay isang ordinaryo at pribadong mamamayan lang. Hindi ito kasalanan ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. Tumutupad lang ang Pangulo sa batas. Kung meron dapat sisihin, walang iba, kundi ang kanyang sariling ama. dahil sa mga pag-amin nito na siya mismo ay pumatay at nagpapatay kasama ang ibang mga co-perpetrators. Malamang ay ikanalulungkot lamang niya dahil ang ICC ay isang impartial court. Hindi maaaring gamitan ng impluensya at hindi kayang takutin, nasaktan o anumang pwedeng gawing karahasan. So, muli, ang mga sinabi po ni Vice Presidente ay pawang walang katotohanan, useless, baseless, nonsense.
Was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says the government is studying reforms in excise and health taxes to offset an estimated 66 billion pesos in foregone revenues from President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s proposed tax relief package. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro told reporters Thursday that the Department of Finance, or DOF, is evaluating measures that could recover lost revenues while keeping the country's investment climate attractive. She noted that higher taxes on products such as vaping items, sugary drinks, and single-use plastics are among the options being considered. Castro acknowledged the projected revenue loss is significant, stressing that it could otherwise fund government projects and programs. She assured the public that all proposals will undergo thorough study to balance investor confidence with benefits for ordinary Filipinos.
Ngayon ay pinag-aaralan na po ng DOF yung mga tax measures at ang posible na maaaring magkaroon ng pagbabago o reforma ay yung excise and health tax cases, no? About na maaaring mag-offset sa maaaring mawala na revenue ng gobyerno na nagkakahalaga nga ng 66 billion pesos. Malaking halaga po ito na supposed to be ay talagang pwedeng ipangtulong sa ating mga programa at proyekto. At ina-assure po ng gobyerno at ng pamahalaan na lahat po ng measures ay dadaan sa pag-aaral para hindi po naman masyado maapektuhan din yung ibang mga investors natin at mas maganda ang maging maidulot nito sa ating mga kababayan. Sa ngayon, tinitignan yung pinakadetalye at lahat ng proposals kasi pag-aaralan dahil ito nga ay nabanggit ng Pangulo na nais niya talaga na matulungan, especially yung mga middle income. Lahat pong ito ay gagawin para po maipasang mabilis itong mga tax laws na ito na nais ng Pangulo.
The President's tax relief package, outlined in his fifth State of the Nation address, seeks to expand income tax exemptions for workers earning up to 350,000 pesos annually, reduce rates for other wage earners, scrap the minimum corporate income tax for small businesses, and grant tax amnesty on unpaid obligations.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says the government is pursuing a balanced approach to President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s proposal to remove systems loss charges from electricity bills, assuring both consumers and power industry stakeholders that reforms will be carefully crafted to avoid undue burden. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro welcomed the openness of power industry players to discuss the plan, noting that consultations are already underway following the President's call in his fifth State of the Nation address to amend the Electric Power Industry Reform Act, or EPIRA. Her remarks came after Meralco chairman Manny Pangilinan warned that eliminating systems loss charges would have significant implications for generation, transmission, and distribution firms. Castro emphasized that the government is working with stakeholders to ensure reforms lower electricity rates while maintaining sector stability. Energy Secretary Sharon Garin has confirmed that the Department of Energy or DOE is reviewing existing regulations and policies while consulting stakeholders. Castro stressed that the administration aims to strike a balance between consumer welfare and the viability of utility companies and investors. She also assured rural electric cooperatives that their concerns will be heard during consultations.
Maganda po na senyales yan, although marami po talagang pagdaraanan na pag-aaral at maraming maapektuhan, but at least nakikita po natin na open sila for discussion. At ngayon ay kinuha ko rin po, dahil nga po nabalitaan natin yan, kinuha ko na rin po mismo ang mensahe ni Secretary Sharon Garin. Ang sabi po ni Secretary Sharon Garin ng DOE, "We are currently studying the regulations of ERC, legislations, and other policies and doing consultations with stakeholders. The objective is to lower electricity rates, and I ask for patience and cooperation of all stakeholders while we craft the policies." So, lahat po ito ay inaaral at bubuuin po ng hindi naman po masyadong burdensome din sa iba nating mga kababayan at sa mga investors and utility companies.
Under current rules, utilities and cooperatives are allowed to recover a portion of technical and non-technical systems losses through electricity rates, subject to limits set by the Energy Regulatory Commission. President Marcos has urged Congress to amend the law, arguing that consumers should no longer shoulder these charges.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang has expressed confidence that concerns surrounding the proposed Pax Silica project will not weaken investor confidence, assuring the public that the government is carefully addressing issues raised by stakeholders. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said Thursday that the administration remains open to refining certain provisions of the project to ensure greater benefits for Filipinos and partners. She noted that questions about water and electricity supply are being taken into account, with the government committed to balancing development goals with community needs. Castro emphasized that consultations are ongoing, led by the Basis Conversion and Development Authority, or BCDA, which has already engaged local government units, or LGUs, and agencies on new Clark City's development plans. Ground assessments are now underway to ensure decisions are based on accurate and responsible evaluation. She stressed that investor confidence remains intact as the government's efforts to refine the project demonstrate transparency and responsiveness. Stakeholders, she added, are encouraged to coordinate directly with concerned agencies to raise questions and concerns.
Kaya nga po, ito ay inihahayag ng ating pamahalaan patungkol sa Pax Silica dahil kung sino man po yung ibang mayroong issue patungkol sa di umano magiging problema sa supply ng tubig, sa supply ng kuryente, lahat pong ito ay isinasaalang-alang ng pamahalaan. May chance po na mabago ang ibang mga provisions. Kung ano po yung maaari pang mas maging magandang idulot sa ating mga kababayan, sa bansang Pilipinas, and of course, sa mga partners, yun naman po ay isasaalang-alang. Hindi naman po dahil ngayon po ay talagang inaayos natin. Again, sa may mga issues patungkol po dito, mas maganda po makipag-usap po tayo sa mga concerned agencies patungkol po sa Pax Silica para kung anuman ang inyong mga naiisip na magiging problema, ito po ay mabigyan ng solusyon.
Silica Initiative, envisioned as a high-tech manufacturing and innovation hub under the Luzon Economic Corridor, aims to position the Philippines as a global player in semiconductors, artificial intelligence, and critical minerals. The BCDA earlier projected the project could attract between 40 billion US dollars and 70 billion dollars in investments and generate up to 190,000 high-quality jobs for Filipino engineers, researchers, and other skilled professionals.
Dateline Malacañang.
Still on Thursday, Malacañang has warned local government units or LGUs against scammers and purveyors of disinformation exploiting the Office of the President's Assistance Programs, stressing that beneficiaries are never required to pay fees or provide unauthorized information to access government funds. Palace Press Officer Claire Castro issued the reminder following reports of individuals approaching LGUs about the Local Government Support Fund or LGSF and the Social Civic Projects Fund or SCPF. She emphasized that the government will never demand payment from LGU beneficiaries to release their budgets. Castro urged local officials to carefully verify the identities of anyone seeking information, warning that sensitive data could be misused to divert benefits intended for legitimate recipients. She advised LGUs to immediately report suspicious activities to the Office of the President.
Mag-ingat sa scam at disinformation tungkol sa LGSF at SCPF ng Office of the President. Hindi maniningil ng kabayaran o anumang fees ang gobyerno sa mga LGU beneficiaries upang makuha ang kanilang budget. Kaya kapag ka po sa inyo ay may pumunta, humingi na inyong mga impormasyon, tignan nyo lamang po at suriin kung ang mga taong pumupunta sa inyo ay nararapat na kausapin. Dahil baka hingin lamang ang impormasyon mula sa inyo at ang mga benepisyong ilalaan sa inyo ay mapunta sa iba. Kapag kami ganyan po ng mga problema, isang guni lamang po ninyo, ipagbigay alam po ninyo mismo sa atin, sa aming opisina, para po ito ay makontrol at mahinto ang ganitong mga klaseng pang-aabuso sa ating mga kababayan.
GSF finances priority programs and projects of local governments, while the SCPF supports community development initiatives. Latest figures show 1,276 LGUs nationwide have received financial assistance for the RISE program, while the SCPF has reached 37,048 barangays, about 82% of the country's villages, with total releases amounting to 7.41 billion pesos.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other developments, Labor Secretary Francis Tolentino's reaction to the court order halting the wage increase in Metro Manila carried both disappointment and restraint. He admitted feeling saddened for workers who had already begun to benefit from the adjustment, yet he underscored that the Department of Labor and Employment or DOLE would abide by the judiciary's directive. The Temporary Restraining Order or TRO, issued by Judge Marie Joyce Manongsong of Pasig Regional Trial Court or RTC Branch 152, froze the implementation of Wage Order number 27. The order had granted an 85 peso daily wage hike for private sector workers in the capital, but was challenged by two construction firms seeking to block its rollout. For many laborers, the first tranche of the increase, 60 pesos, that took effect on July 25th, was a welcome relief. The remaining 25 pesos was scheduled for January 2027, now uncertain under the TRO. Tolentino acknowledged the setback but pointed out that the court alone must explain its reasoning. Even as the legal process unfolds, the Labor Department continues to emphasize its mandate of protecting workers' welfare. Tolentino's tone reflected the tension between the hopes of employees and the realities of legal challenges, a reminder that the fight for fair wages remains a contested space where government, business, and the courts intersect.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, has renewed its call for the complete elimination of nuclear weapons, stressing that disarmament remains the only guarantee against their use. In a chair's statement released by the Philippines, the 33rd ASEAN Regional Forum, or ARF, held on July 23rd, urged nuclear weapon states to honor their obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty and advance global disarmament efforts. The forum, one of the region's top security platforms, gathered ASEAN members alongside partners including the United States, China, Russia, Japan, the European Union, and others. Ministers voiced grave concern over North Korea's continued nuclear and missile programs, describing them as violations of the United Nations Security Council resolutions and a threat to regional peace. They called for the resumption of peaceful dialogue on the Korean Peninsula, while also discussing developments in the South China Sea, Myanmar, and the Middle East. The Philippines emphasized ASEAN's readiness to play a constructive role through its own platforms, fostering dialogue and cooperation among parties. The meeting also formally admitted the United Kingdom as the 28th participant, recognizing its strong engagement with ASEAN as a dialogue partner. The statement reaffirmed confidence in the ARF's role in promoting peace, stability, and prosperity in the Asia-Pacific, underscoring ASEAN's commitment to strengthen the forum as a key mechanism for addressing regional and international security challenges.
Dateline Malacañang.
In other news, the Philippine National Police, or PNP, has intensified cyber operations to track down individuals behind social media accounts allegedly used to incite disruption during President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s fifth State of the Nation Address, or SONA. PNP Chief General Jose Melencio Nartates Jr. ordered the Anti-Cybercrime Group to step up monitoring and digital forensic investigations in coordination with the Cybercrime Investigation and Coordinating Center and partner agencies. The move follows the President's directive to hold accountable those who exploit digital platforms for criminal activity. Authorities earlier flagged 9 social media accounts linked to hacker groups that reportedly sought to encourage public disorder during the SONA. The accounts have since been taken down, with preserved digital data turned over to investigators. Those behind them may face charges ranging from computer fraud and identity theft to grave threats and inciting rebellion. Investigators are also probing possible connections between the online threats and 2 suspected improvised explosive device incidents reported on SONA Day, one inside the Department of Justice compound and another near the Senate. Leads have already been established on the perpetrators. The PNP stressed that while it respects freedom of expression, it will act against those who use online platforms to incite violence or spread credible threats. The public is urged to remain vigilant, avoid sharing unverified content, and report suspicious posts to authorities.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, the Philippine government has extended immediate aid to 38 repatriated overseas Filipino workers or OFWs and their 12 dependents from Dubai, along with 17 Filipino seafarers affected by an incident in the Black Sea upon their arrival Thursday at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport or NAIA. Personnel from the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration or OWA and the Department of Migrant Workers or DMW welcomed the repatriates at NAIA Terminal 3, providing airport assistance, food, financial aid, transportation, and temporary accommodation for those in need. The 17 seafarers of MT Gas also received special financial assistance, with their manning agency arranging transport and lodging as they completed post-arrival requirements. OWA assured that support will continue beyond their return home, with reintegration programs offering employment opportunities, livelihood and entrepreneurship aid, skills training, and other initiatives to help rebuild lives. The agency emphasized that under President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s leadership, every OFW can rely on government support throughout their migration journey, from deployment to times of crisis to safe return and reintegration into their families and communities.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download eVox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our post as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and mabuhay.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.